I recently got the chance to stay at the Inn at 500, located in the heart of downtown Boise. With complimentary drinks at check-in and spacious luxe penthouses and suites, it's an ideal spot for celebrations and your visitors. It was the perfect place for me and my husband to sneak away for a little staycation. We loved the cozy fireplace in our room and the balcony with gorgeous views of the city skyline, where we shared coffee in the morning. Ready to plan an unforgettable Boise stay? Book now at innat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise. With the ACHD election coming up, executive producer Frankie Barnhill invited Idaho Statesman reporter Nick Rosenberger to discuss why this local race is so important. Nick shares what candidates have said about safety, bike lanes, and growing traffic concerns, and what this election could mean for the future of transit in Boise. It's Thursday, October 24th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about.
Okay, so for those who don't know, just a really quick primer on this race, this Ada County Highway District race that we're going to dig into. First off, though, what is ACHD and why do these commission races matter?
Yeah, so ACHD, or the Ada County Highway District, is kind of a unique thing. Most cities around the country and even around Idaho have control of their own streets and roads. But back in the 1970s, Ada County voters chose to instead create this district, this countywide district that's separate from Ada County, to control all of the roads and streets in the county. The members who serve on the Board of Commissioners actually have quite a lot of sway in what happens around Ada County, in how we get to work and how we are able to walk from one shop to another, or how we're able to bike. There's a lot of decisions that go on there, and that's up to the highway district.
So that kind of sets the stakes. This is a very important race and very important commission, and especially in a time where Boise's growing and changing so much, and people are needing to get from places safely, but also in a fast way. There's a lot of different things going on. So, but first, they're nonpartisan races, though, right? So when people, go to their ballot, if they're voting early or they're voting on election day, they're not going to see a D for Democrat or an R for Republican next to these names, right?
Yeah, it is a nonpartisan race, but that isn't to say that it doesn't sometimes swing in partisan ways.
So there's 2 seats, am I right? 2 seats this year that are contested, meaning that there's 2 candidates vying for the same seat, at least, to serve as ACHG commissioner. And that's all right? Yeah. Is there a 3rd seat though that's open too?
Yeah. So there's 3 seats that are open right now. District 5, which Commissioner Dave McKinney holds, he's running unopposed, so he basically gets that seat.
Gotcha.
Then there's District 1 and District 2 as well. Those are both competitive races. So in District 1, longtime Commissioner Jim Hansen, he's not running for re-election. And 2 people are looking for that seat. The first is Patricia Nelson. She's a former city planner who worked for the city of Boise and Canyon County. The other person seeking that seat is Antonio Bomarito. He works in real estate and information technology. And they're both, duking it out for Jim Hansen's seat. Hansen has put his weight between Patricia Nelson.
Okay, so that's District 5, District 1, but we're going to focus in on District 2. And these names, deja vu for voters probably, but tell us who's running and kind of what their relevant stories are behind these people.
Yeah. District 2 is definitely the highlight of the election here. It is a rematch between current Commissioner Alexis Pickering and former Commissioner Rebecca Arnold. There is quite a lot of history there. Rebecca Arnold was a commissioner for 16 years, so she's had a big influence on Ada County.
Yeah. The
transportation, the way we move around towns. Pickering defeated Arnold in the 2020 election by 2 votes.
2 votes.
Yeah, it was a close race.
Wasn't there a recount though? Right?
Yeah. Arnold got a recount, and that lead grew to 4 votes. So Pickering, after the recount was done, Pickering had 4 votes more than Rebecca Arnold. Arnold sued Alexis Pickering and a few people with the county, saying that they had counted the ballots incorrectly. That case was dismissed. So that put Pickering on the commission. So Pickering became commission president, and Arnold, I believe, 2 years later, became the 80 county assessor instead. She won election for that role instead, and she's seeking to get back on the ACHD board.
Where in Ada County do you have to live to vote in the District 2 race? Like, where are we talking about that this district covers?
Yeah, so District 2 is the most central of ACHD's 5 districts. It covers the West Bank and most of Garden City. Kind of runs from Eagle Road in the west to the Boise River in the east and north, and then bordering Interstate 84 and Franklin Road to the south. So it kind of creates this triangle shape, kind of in the middle of Ada County.
Yeah, and lots of different transit issues going on in that district in particular, and lots of different changes happening over the years.
Yeah, absolutely.
This episode is brought to you by Financial Times. When it comes to voicing or acting on our opinions, why are some people more confident than others? With the Financial Times, you form your own opinions with conviction based on unbiased and trusted reporting. FT journalists tackle global issues with an impartial and rigorous mindset, providing the facts and analysis that you need to make up your own mind. Make up your own mind with Financial Times. Visit ft.com/thejournal to read free articles and subscribe.
In business, service is everything. Cintas delivers what you need to better serve your customers. Whether it's freshly laundered work apparel for almost any job imaginable, tested and inspected fire protection systems, first aid and safety supplies, on-site AED training, or mops and restroom products, stocked and ready when you need them. Better workdays happen together. So visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
Okay, so yeah, the drama behind this race, it feels like it's kind of ramping up a little bit, and I'd love to hear more about your reporting. But as you said, yeah, these two candidates, Pickering and Arnold, they have a history. The fact that Arnold was in this role for 3 terms and now is kind of coming back after that very dramatic recount and the lawsuits and all of that. Do you think that this race might be just as close as the one in 2020?
It's kind of difficult to gauge where people are going. We don't have the level of polling that we see in like national elections, for instance,
Right.
with the presidential election.
Yeah.
There's polls every single day. We don't really have that for these smaller local elections like ACHD. One way to kind of gauge interest is by looking at donations and contributions that candidates receive. It's not a perfect science. Just because you have more money doesn't mean you're going to win the election.
Right.
It does mean that you can put out more yard signs and ads, which do have an impact on voters. But currently, Pickering has quite a large lead over Arnold in the fundraising race.
Interesting. Has she kind of maintained that lead throughout, or has there been a big flurry of donations recently?
Yeah, so Pickering has seen a pretty steady collection of donations. Starting in March, she got a bunch of $1,000 contributions, which that's the maximum contribution amount in Idaho. She got a bunch of donations in April and May, and kind of leading up to this. So it has been spread out. I would imagine she's had an influx recently, just as the election ramps up, but it looks pretty spread out.
So what is that margin between what Pickering's raised versus what Arnold has?
She's raised about $63,000 so far.
Okay.
Rebecca Arnold has received about $7,000 in contributions in comparison.
Wow. Yeah, that's a wide margin. But as you said, money doesn't always mean someone's going to win, but it does mean that they have a lot more opportunities to get their message out in different ways. Okay, I know this is reductive, but but I think it's kind of fair. Can this race, because we're going to get into the policies and the politics behind these two candidates, can this race kind of be boiled down to one candidate who's very pro-car, meaning Rebecca Arnold, former commissioner, and the other who is very pro all kinds of transportation, aka Pickering, so biking, walking, buses, and cars?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I guess in a general sense, you could say that's what this race is about. Alexis Pickering does lean towards what we call multimodal transportation, which is, more public transportation, more buses, more pedestrian access ways. While Arnold is focused more on car centric infrastructure. But that's not to say that they're both not considering the other. Like they're not dead set. Like Rebecca Arnold has told me that, she recognizes the need for you know better bikeways or pedestrian safety improvements, and Alexis Pickering has said, obviously, that you need car infrastructure. So yes, they lean, there's certain ways, and they're quite opposed to each other on a lot of things and the priorities of Ada County Highway District. But that's not to say that they don't recognize the other side and the need for the other side as well.
Okay. Thank you for being the person who brings some nuance to my pithy side by side there. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's dig more into what they say they'll do in this role. Let's start with the incumbent, with Pickering, who says, what does she say she'll do if she gets reelected? What are her priorities?
Yeah, so Pickering has been focused really heavily on safety recently. There was a string of accidents, a couple deaths on near State Street in near downtown Boise.
And these were pedestrian deaths, right?
Yeah. And I think that those affected Pickering quite heavily, and so she's introduced or been a part of changes to that stretch of State Street in downtown Boise, and kind of bolstering safety for people that are just trying to get around. Arnold obviously also cares about safety, but she is focused on probably more so on congestion.
Interesting.
And reducing, the times that people are in cars, that those rush hour frustrations, I would say Arnold is probably a little bit more focused on.
What is, going back to Pickering specifically, because one of the things, like, I think about like the 11th Street bikeway that came about, while she was in office, and that she was supportive of, others on the commission too, that being kind of the gold standard, according to like bike advocates, for a protected bikeway that gets people from one part of the city to another, really very in a protected way, as well as you mentioned, this project on State Street that hasn't started yet and won't start for a while, right? Reduction in lanes for more pedestrian and bike infrastructure.
Yeah, that one will probably start, they'll probably be working on it in 2025, and then 2026 is probably when the bulk of the construction and the work is going to be done on that. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely trade-offs to things. So, if you're building protected bike lanes, that takes up space.
Right.
And
it took a car lane away. Yeah.
Yeah. Those could be car lanes that, more people use to get to work at 9 a.m. on a Monday. And so there's trade-offs, and it's, what do we prioritize? What do the cities, what do the communities care about? And I think that's, I guess, a really difficult thing to pin down at times, especially when you're looking at the system as a whole. Like, what does the county need? With the State Street issue, Rebecca Arnold has said that, Boise is the state's capital. Most people in this state drive everywhere. And so you need a way for all of these people to drive to the Capitol, to be able to speak out on legislation during a session. But also, if people are dying on our streets, then probably something should be done. So it's a balance. It's a fine balance. There's a lot of nuance there that you have to consider when making these sorts of decisions.
Okay, so speaking of the State Street project that'll start sometime in the near future, to hopefully address some of these accidents that have happened with pedestrians. You said in your article, you quoted Arnold as saying, like, that was really her last straw because she's against this idea. Why exactly is she against it?
Yeah. There is, I guess, a hint of truth to her argument that, cutting State Street, which is very, very heavy, there is a lot of congestion during rush hours.
It's a thoroughfare. Yeah.
Cutting it down from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, with one of those lanes being a turn lane. So really, it's just you got one lane going one way, and you have one lane going the other way. It's basically a 2-lane road. So obviously cutting out that capacity is going to lead to some issues. And Pickering says that, there's capacity on the surrounding streets. So like Bannock or Jefferson,
Sure.
those roads aren't being used as much as they could be. So some of that traffic could go on those roads instead.
Mm-hmm.
But Arnold, it really was, she told me, the last straw for her, that like creating more congestion on State Street by shrinking the number of lanes was just not good policy, that it didn't make any sense to her. Because it is an important thoroughfare. It is, a lot of people use it to get where they're going. And even if they shrink it down to 2 lanes or 3 lanes, that's probably it's not gonna help congestion. But it might indeed help safety.
You mentioned how, Rebecca Arnold, besides having been on the commission for 3 terms previously before Pickering unseated her in 2020, she's already elected as the county assessor. That was in 2022. What has she said about that role if she also gets elected to ACHD? Can she hold both at the same time?
Yeah. She said that she plans on staying as the Ada County assessor if she is elected to the Ada County Highway District. It's not the first time. I mean, she was on ACHD for 16 years, and she sought other elected office in that time as well.
Interesting.
So
because
it's
the
not,
commission race, I mean, it's a part-time role being a commissioner, right?
Yeah. It's a part-time role. It doesn't pay, a huge amount.
I wonder, Arnold had, I'm old enough to remember when Rebecca Arnold was on the commission, and she had a contentious relationship with the city of Boise. And, I'm thinking about even with the previous Mayor Dave Beater, I don't think there was love lost between the two of them at different points in their relationship. And because ACHG needs to work with cities and this dynamic is very important, and that relationship is very important. Like, has she addressed that at all? Or what are you thinking about as a reporter on this story, thinking about, if she were to be reelected, and Pickering being someone who's really in the last 4 years, like, partnered with the city of Boise on a lot of their priorities?
Yeah. And this leads to a larger issue that I'll get to as well. There was definitely a contentious relationship between ACHD and the city of Boise while Dave Beater was in office, and while Rebecca Arnold was in office. During the race for Boise mayor in 2019, Dave Beater went so far as to say that she was the most contentious public servant he'd ever been around. And I asked Arnold about this. I asked about her relationships with cities, and she said that, yeah, she didn't have a great relationship with Dave Beater, but that she doesn't have any issues with cities, and that she thought that she had good relationships with the cities in Ada County. But yeah, Rebecca Arnold did have a bit of history as challenging cities. For instance, there was a salt shed in Garden City that led to some lawsuits that Rebecca Arnold was involved with.
Right.
So there are some historical, I guess, considerations for Rebecca Arnold's return to the commission.
My eye just twitched when you said salt shed. I remember that going down. Well, anyway, we don't need to dig into the past too much more, but I do think that's interesting, given that, yeah, again, she was on the commission for so many years and then is returning. But I wonder too, let's talk about Pickering a little bit more. I know that she's in her day job, she's the executive director of Conservation Voters for Idaho, which is interesting given, that she's interested, as we've talked about, more in like alternative modes of transportation, getting people out of their cars, giving them viable options outside of their cars, partnering with cities like City of Boise that has a very ambitious climate change goal. What else, what do you think about when you think about that role, her day job, and then her role on ACHD?
Yeah, I mean, Conservation Voters for Idaho it's a nonprofit, and it's focused mostly on political action to protect the natural environment. And so I think that somewhat goes hand in hand with the ideology of more bikes, more public transportation. There's a lot of people saying that if we bike more, it could help fight climate change. And that's something that the city of Boise has been involved in. They've been really focused on building out other modes of transportation, especially in downtown Boise and in other parts as well, the bench, Greenbelt access, that sort of thing. So one of the issues in this race, I think one of the key issues is relationships. Rebecca Arnold says ACHD's relationship with the Idaho legislature has deteriorated during her term.
Interesting.
Which obviously, if you have a nonprofit like Conservation Voters of Idaho, people who don't agree with that might be a little more combative towards the person who's the president of the highway district. And Rebecca Arnold is, she's a registered Republican. She's run as a Republican. She has a lot of friends in the legislature who identify that way. And so there is sort of this ideological battle going on as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. It kind of speaks to what we mentioned before about how, technically these are nonpartisan races, but we do kind of see these partisan leans in their policies and politics and ideology who they get endorsements from, which is my segue. So who's endorsed these candidates? Have they received endorsements?
I haven't been paying a huge amount of attention to endorsements, but looking at donations and contributions, you can kind of see who's voting which way or who's leaning whichever way. So Pickering has received donations from the Idaho Associated General Contractors. That's a political action committee. She's also received a lot of individual contributions from local developers. So for instance, Barber Valley Development, she received $1,000 from. Those are the guys that are building the Harris Ranch community. Arnold has received less contributions, as mentioned before, but she does have maximum $1,000 contributions from the Idaho Realtors Political Action Committee, as well as the Building Contractors Association of Southwest Idaho. So they've both received contributions from general contractors and building contractors. And, a lot of developers put a lot of money into this race because it affects them. And they have the money to do this.
Okay, Nick, any kind of final thoughts when we're thinking about these two candidates in this race and kind of what it means, both in terms of like how we move around the Treasure Valley, how we get from point A to point B, and also just ACHD's role?
Yeah. So Pickering and Arnold have kind of different views of ACHD's role. And it's this really kind of fundamental difference that I think is driving a lot of this election. Arnold tends to think of ACHD as more of a county-wide thing, so how do we look at the roads from this top-down, like county-wide issue? If everyone in Star drives cars and needs to go to Boise, how do we develop Boise so people can get around for everybody? Pickering sees it more as ACHD is to defer to the cities. So, all cities have different visions for themselves. They all have different dreams. They all want to develop in certain ways. And she sees ACHD as deferring to them and then like building that into the system. So, for instance, Boise really wants more bike lanes. They want more of these multimodal transportation options, while a place like Eagle does not want that. They want their car-centric infrastructure. And so Pickering sees it as like, okay, how do we have these different dreams of our cities and like build that into the system? While Arnold is much more of a like, okay, this is what we need to do as a county kind of issue, which boils down to that conversation about relationships and, how these commissioners deal with cities and how much say do they have in roads, because they don't have control over their own roads, which can be a conflict point for a lot.
Fascinating. Nick, I could nerd out about ACHD with you forever. So we should wrap it up here. Really important race, really helpful information for folks to know going into the election. So thanks so much for helping us understand it better.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, you should subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter for even more upcoming election coverage. And just a quick reminder that tomorrow is the last day to request an absentee ballot. We'll be back tomorrow morning with our Friday News Roundup. You won't want to miss it.